Welcome to The Check-In, a podcast by Telos, where we explore the headlines from Israel, Palestine, and across the world, wading into the complexity of seemingly intractable conflict to discover the power of peacemaking to heal us, our community, and our world. This is your host, David Katibah, checking in from Washington, D.C. today, but I have some news for you all. Today is actually my last episode, so I am passing the mic off to Dave Davis for today.
David, this is a mixed emotion day. While we are excited for you and where you are off to in this next chapter of your journey, we are sad to see you go. And I'm sure the millions of podcast listeners that are listening to this podcast are also sad to hear the golden tones of David Katibah departing. But I believe you will be back in some form or another to the podcast, and we look forward to that.
Yeah, once you're part of the Telos family, you never quite leave. But I'm so grateful to be here one last time, Dave. It feels very weird to be on this side of the show.
I would imagine that it would, and I'm not going to hold any punches. I have a lot of really good questions for you today.
Okay, so yeah, I'm excited to get to talk about my experience at Telos and reflect on these past 6 years that I've been on the team, which is crazy. And it's been almost more than 4 years now of doing the podcast, which is pretty insane. But grateful to be here in conversation with you, Dave. And thanks for stepping in to do this.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. All right. So take us back to your first days at Telos. What was happening in the world and what pulled you into this work?
Wow. It's almost hard to believe that the world existed prior to COVID, but that's when I joined Telos back in 2019. And I was coming in as a part-time fellow. So when I first joined Telos, I wasn't even full-time. I had graduated a couple years earlier from undergrad and had left my time in school ready to participate in the work of diplomacy and conflict transformation, primarily because I saw what was happening in the Middle East and I wanted to be a part of healing. I wanted to be part of the work of justice. I wanted to be a part of building a world in which vulnerable people did not have to flee their homes. At the time, so much of what was pulling me in that direction was my own heritage in the Middle East, being Syrian American, seeing, how Syria had faced just the most horrific circumstances under the Assad regime and millions of people having to flee their homes. At the same time, I was watching unfold in Israel, Palestine, the continuation of decades of occupation and injustice, and an American discourse in which advocating for something that looked like mutual flourishing, for shared humanity, for a future that was intertwined and interdependent between Israelis and Palestinians, there was very little space for that. So I came into Telos, frankly, really bought into the vision. I'd met Todd a couple years earlier and was hearing him talk about this vision of, at the time, pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, pro-peace. And I was like, that's it. That's what we need. That's what I need on my campus at UNC. And getting to join this team and participate in that work felt like such a thrill. I will say I was very close to not accepting this internship. And that's a story for another time you can ask me about personally once I leave. But I'm so glad I did, because it's been so transformative. And it's funny looking back at the world that we lived in at that time, particularly in Israel, Palestine, in which the world we live in today is so different as it relates to Israel, Palestine than it was 6 years ago, because very few people, especially in my world, the world that I come from, I grew up in the South, I come from, the evangelical Christian tradition. Very few people were open to talking about this issue, were open to being curious about this issue. And yet the realities on the ground were so dire even then. So there was this kind of longing to help invite Christians in my community to begin to ask questions, begin to look in new ways, perhaps even to go and visit. I think our world is very different than it was then. Some things have changed for the better. There's some openness and curiosity perhaps that has grown. Of course, we're living in a world that has seen the circumstances on the ground deteriorate in ways I could never have imagined 6 years ago.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. I'd like to get your take on what some of those differences are, but staying in the past for a few moments, when you think back to those first weeks, months as you were leading into coming on board, and then your first sort of few months on the team, I'm curious what your thoughts were about Telos, about the practical steps of peacemaking that maybe has shifted over the 6 years that you've been on board with Telos. How have those things in your own mind, either your understanding of Telos's work and or the idea of practical embodied peacemaking, how have those things shifted over these 6 years?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. It's funny. In my interview with Todd, and at the time Jordan, who was the previous director of Christian engagement or Christian partnerships back in 2019, I asked them this explicit question. I said, working at Telos, am I going to learn what it takes to be a peacemaker? And they kind of had this answer. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going to be, we had this focus on Israel Palestine, but it's core to what we do. But at the time, we didn't have really a language for it that was institutionalized. The principles and practices of peacemaking didn't exist at that point in the history of our organization. And I was a bit skeptical, I'll be honest. I really wanted to learn, what does it take to build a society that can move from conflict into flourishing and into justice. And I knew we had these amazing trips, and I knew you get to meet these amazing people, but I wanted something concrete. And I trusted Todd and Jordan. I said, yes, let's go all in on this. And immediately I said, I want to get on a trip. If this is where the magic happens, let's do this. I want to get over there. Of course, being a part-time intern isn't the most compelling reason to for an institution to spend money on sending someone halfway across the world. But eventually, I convinced Telos to do so, and I think, like so many of you who have been on these experiences, I was completely transformed. And even as someone who had been following this issue for many years, had begun advocating on it around during my undergrad years, and had even joined the Telos team, being on the ground with the people who deal with these realities every day, who somehow choose action and hope and reconciliation and justice and shared humanity every day in the most challenging of circumstances, it really changed me. I mean, it changed almost my DNA. And all of a sudden, I began to capture this vision of what peacemaking actually is and what it takes, and the tensions that you have to navigate. In some ways, the sacrifices you have to endure in order to stay true to this commitment of not only your own flourishing, but the flourishing of your neighbor and even your so-called enemy. And so seeing that lived out in real time in Israel Palestine, and soon after that in the US South with our partners, really gave me this concrete vision of this is what it takes. And as soon as COVID happened, we began working on this principles and practices of peacemaking document, and even just getting to draft that with the team and consider what does it actually take? How do we need to show up as human beings, especially as American citizens in our country with so much power and privilege that so many other people in the world do not experience. That was such a transformative learning experience for me, to learn what it takes to be a peacemaker. And I think doing this work every day, of showing up in our office, reading the headlines, hearing stories from our partners, and choosing not to dehumanize or buy into these lies of us versus them, that I have to dominate or steal or take from my neighbor in order to survive. That's been a masterclass in peacemaking for me, and the way that we talk and engage across the spectrum and choose to be a community that creates space for belonging and invitation, rather than a community that excludes and dominates in order to secure our vision of what justice might look like.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I just have to breathe there in that moment, right? I mean, you said a lot of things there that I think resonate with a lot of people. And you've seen a lot over these 6 years. You've read a lot, you've seen a lot, you've met so many different people. I'm curious if as you've witnessed this deep sense of loss and heartbreak, but also some extreme hope and joy along the way, I'm sure. I'm wondering if there's a moment that you could reflect on that hit you the hardest, was a challenging experience. It was a something that you witnessed, that you experienced along the way that maybe strikes at the very core of who you are in a way that's difficult.
Mm. Well, I mean, I'll be honest, Dave, I can think of a number of experiences doing this work over 6 years in which I have been really challenged spiritually, emotionally, physically. I can think of a moment, I'll share two, in which we were in the South actually this spring with this cohort of Palestinian leaders who joined us across the US South for our Restore US experience. And we were in a room at dinner, and some in the group began sharing what it meant for them to be in the US, hearing the stories of not only our history, but also of our partners on the ground who are dealing with, again, just centuries of momentum of injustice that we've made progress on, but still exists so strongly today. And they just took a moment, frankly, to pause and to weep around all that they are carrying in this moment, these Palestinian leaders, all that they were faced with seeing and what it was bringing up in them, and in the ways in which our contexts mirror each other, of how particularly at this table, we talked about this on a podcast recently with Daniel Benora on our show, but how this table of Palestinian men and Black men from the South were talking about the way they experience being pulled over or stopped by a guard or policeman, and how similar that experience was for them. And this fear that these Palestinians were sharing, that their people will never experience freedom, that it'll just be centuries and decades of struggle. And that was a really difficult moment for me, to sit in the grief with them, to know all that they're carrying, to know the pain that this experience was bringing up in them, and to not have, this magical solution that gets us to justice on the other side, even though it's what we were all there for, and that's what we were all fighting for and struggling for every day. I think the other thing that I might say is, obviously for so many of us, October 7th was such a challenging day, and it's been so challenging every day since. But there was a particular moment of anguish and pain that came not only from hearing what was going on in the region, and of course we didn't know very much within the first 24 hours. It was all very unclear what was going on. We were getting videos, we're hearing, snippets of information. But there are friends of mine who, in their, and I'll just speak very frankly here, who in their excitement and zeal for justice for Palestinians, for freedom for the people of Gaza who had been under siege for 17 years, very quickly began to condone, even celebrate what was happening on the ground, that this fence had been broken. And I just remember feeling so deeply betrayed by that response, that in this, quest for justice, it accepted suffering and death and violence against someone on the other side. And I just reject that entirely. I believe that is not the path towards our freedom or towards our liberation, that our futures are intertwined, that our humanity is shared across the board, even in our so-called enemies. And to feel as if, Telos and our team and the folks alongside us, our colleagues in this work, we felt like an island for a little while, of trying to claim, every death, every human life is important. Every person matters, no matter which side of the fence they fall on. And yes, we need to talk about the context that happened before October 7th, but nothing can justify what happened on October 7th, and nothing can justify what has happened since. As we said, a war crime does not justify a war crime on either side, and we trap ourselves in the spiral of violence when we believe that it does. And it felt like a very unpopular message in that moment, and it felt like a message that even people who I love were deeply against. And to have friends on all sides of this issue and all forms of in the various communities that represent the mosaic of this land was a very challenging time, I would say, to hold true to that.
It was a challenging time. It continues to be a challenging time. It'll go down, I think, as one of those days where we remember for the rest of our lives, right? Where we were, what we were doing, what we were experiencing. I take some relief in the power of our own Telos community and network. I take some relief in that because it has felt like over this last, now coming up on two years, has felt very lonely at times, but also quite a bit of encouragement along the way,
Yes.
as I've heard voices from different parts of the world and different people showing up. I'm wondering for you if you can think back over the 6 years, what are or who are some of the voices or people from the region that now like live deeply inside of you? Maybe it's a writer, maybe it's someone you met along the way, maybe it's a friendship that you have. But when you look back and you think about those voices that are in our world, in your world, who kind of stands out as being a source of something for you? I don't want to label it as hope or whatever, but that represents something for you, a learning and an opportunity, a sense of hope. Is there a voice or a person or a writer or somebody that kind of stands out for you that's like deeply inside of you that maybe wasn't before?
Oh gosh, so many, Dave. And I just want to echo your comments too, that it has felt lonely, and yet it feels like this island is growing too. And holding true to that voice over these past almost 2 years now, we've seen more and more people recognize that this violence is how we got here. It is not how we get out. And that's been truly, as I mentioned at the top of this call, one of the places that I'm holding with me of hope, that there is possibility for transformation, that people can choose another way when they've been given a vision of it. And I've been given a vision of that other way by so many people throughout the years across Israel, Palestine, across Ireland and Northern Ireland, across US South. I mean, it's hard to choose just one person. I mean, the person who comes to mind most immediately, well, I'll have two people. One is Jack Saba, who, of course, many of you know and love. And I got to spend a little more than 3 months, actually closer to 4 months, living and working alongside Jack in the region a couple of years ago. That experience, getting to learn from Jack, who is one of the most amazing people in the world, was so powerful for me. His commitment to justice, his commitment to his people and their freedom, and yet his commitment to choosing to see his neighbors, who he can recognize are part of his daily experience of oppression, but the fact that he can still choose to see them as his neighbors whose flourishing is tied to his own, and shows up every day with openness and this possibility and this vision of what justice and flourishing could look like has really stayed with me. I remember one day we were walking into the office, and it was a beautiful, like late February day in Jaffa. And of course, it was like 70 degrees and sunny. And I was just like, man, like this is amazing. Like I love being here. He's like, yeah, this could be a paradise for everyone. And yet 40 miles away from here, or however long how far it is to the border of the West Bank, it's the opposite of a paradise, right? It's a prison. And yet there's this vision that he had that could recognize the injustice that was happening and the, almost facade that we were living in. And yet what it could be too, if we learned how to live together if we learned how to see each other as equal human beings, if we learned to see our future and security and dignity as intertwined. And that was really powerful for me, to leave with this vision of, we could acknowledge all of the brokenness, and yet if we can hold to this possibility, this vision of what we could be, it can empower us through some of the darkest days. I'll also just say very quickly that I love everyone I've met in the US South. They so deeply inspire me. Mama Callie and her wisdom and
And her food.
her food and her joy and her honesty and her vulnerability, the way that she tells her story is like nothing I've ever seen. She opens herself up to so many people and puts her pain on the table. And she says, all of us have been hurt, but our pain shouldn't be wasted. It should move us to action and to healing. And that's what Mama Callie does every single day. She does it through her food. She does it through her storytelling. She does it through her activism. I mean, she is out there on the front lines, building a world in which folks in her community can flourish. And I am so deeply inspired by her and her wisdom, hard fought, hard won wisdom. She is someone who, what she's experienced would crush the rest of us, no doubt about it. And yet she is not keeping any skeletons in the closet. She's choosing to be rooted in love and hope.
It's so good. It's so good. I mean, there's just countless stories, I'm sure, and people that you could reflect on, things that you've read, conversations that you've had over the years, right? That's the nature of what we do as an organization that I think is distinctive and sets us apart, is that we put people in proximity to conversations and to people that will both inspire and challenge at the same time. And you've had so much of that over these years. I'm really curious if you wouldn't mind kind of diving in just a little bit and just very briefly kind of communicate to those who are listening, who are actively, would consider themselves peacemakers. Is there a word that you would leave with them as they listen? Maybe there's a piece of this that kind of you've learned over these years behind the scenes is really hard, or an opportunity to encourage those that might be out there actively making peace, whether it's across their dining room table or whether it is across borders. Is there something that you would want to pass on?
This is a really hard question, Dave, for me, because there's so much that I've learned from so many people that is completely inverted the way that I show up in the world, the way I respond to violence and injustice. And I really feel like it's been baked into my DNA. But one of the things that has been the hardest lesson for me is that it's not my job to save the world.
Yeah.
I came in, as a young, recent college grad with a lot of passion and a lot of excitement and a lot of energy and a lot of hope. And I don't think that hope has been snuffed out of me, but I think it's been shifted a little bit. I think it's taken on a different color. And early on in my time at Telos, Todd asked me to read a book, which is The World Is Not Yours to Save by Tyler Rick Stevenson. And I'm going to be honest, I really struggled with it. I didn't really want to believe and accept its conclusions, right? I wanted to say we have power and agency. And I believe that that's true. But I also see that this is so much bigger than any single one of us, right? That our decisions matter, the way we show up in the world, the way we vote, the way we spend our money, the kinds of stories we tell about other people who we aren't in community with, the kind of stories we tell about the people we are in community with, whether we make space for people to feel like they can be reconciled and join in belonging to us, or experience transformation without being exiled in the process. All of that matters. And yet not a single one of us can change the world on our own, right? and that this work is so much bigger than any single one of us, because these issues and these injustices that we are working against have been built over decades, and many, many people have participated in their perpetuation, and they have a life of their own. And what that means is that not that they are impossible to overcome, but that they will take a community and a movement to overcome. And that's bigger than any one of us. And so there's both this freedom that I've learned to experience from believing that it's all up to me, and therefore I can't take a break. I have to overwork. I have to stay in this forever, which is not true. And there's this invitation also to interdependence and mutuality, that in fact, we need everyone at the table in order to overcome this, even the people who we see as our enemy today. One day we have to say, we are inviting you in to participate in this building of a new world in which you also get to belong alongside me. And I think it's that radical new we that says, I'm a part of this, but I am not all of this, that I need you, that we can only move towards healing together, that I have to do my own work of healing, but I have to create space for you to do your work of healing beside me. That is the one message that I'm really leaving with. And I hope to invite others into, that we need each other, that this system of injustice we see across the world, what I might call, this ethic of colonialism, system of colonialism even, it thrives by dividing and conquering us. Because when we're divided, we're more easily conquerable. So our work is to choose to come together, is to choose to resist together, to build connections across contexts, to build connections across lines of difference. That's how we create system change. That's how we together actually save the world. Ayinka Jackson famously references in all of our trainings in the South Dr. King's quote that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, which is so true. But it's that we are the arc benders together. And so our work matters, and we have to do it together.
David, thank you. I know you have to go, and I have so many more questions. I wanted to ask you about the quirkiest thing about Telos, but
it's the fact that there are so many people named David probably on our team.
probably. But I want to close this, what is for this season anyway, your last podcast with us, with a poem, a blessing to you. It's written by someone that you and I both admire, Padre Kotuma, a peacemaker, an incredible poet. It's called a solstice blessing. And I'm just going to read it, and then I'll let you do your outro as for the last time. As night stretches here, day contracts elsewhere. And in their night, we are bathed in light. In all nights, there is light. In long days, there can be ache too. For you, we call the sun to stand still a while, and the moon too, and stars, and the waters to be, and the heavens, hells as well, just for a second, just for a breath. May that breath rest you, and may each breath rest you, as it has until now, and now, and now. This one, after that one, after that one, after that. I hope this next season for you, as you transition into what is next, you are able to experience some rest because you have done good work, and we're going to miss you. We are going to be cheering you on from the sidelines, but you have taught us all a lot over these years. And now it's an opportunity for you to take a break and to rest. So thank you. Thank you for all of it.
Thanks, Dave. That's such a generous invitation, and I truly received that. And it means a lot that you'd use Padraig on my last episode. That's such a gift. He's the best.
He's the best.
Padraig, if you're listening, I love you and hope to see you out in the world one day.
Yeah.
2 final invitations. I'll just say very quickly for anyone who's listening. One is I am heading off the Telos team, but you may see me at Church at the Crossroads in September. So grab your tickets today. If you need a discount code, you can use one that Telos is offering to everyone on our network. The dates are September 11th through 13th. You can find more information online. We'll include a link in the show notes. We think this is such an important conversation. We hope you'll join us. Secondly, stay in touch with me. You can find me on Instagram at dcatpics. You can follow my writings at my Substack Awakenings. I'll include a link in the show notes as well, but I'd love to stay in touch with you all. And if you ever find yourself in New Haven, don't hesitate to reach out and connect with me.
It's very subtle, David Katibah. Is that what we're saying now? I go to school in New Haven? All right. That's like people who go to Harvard saying, I go to school at Boston. Okay.
Well, okay. I'm saying this now in anticipation that my going away letter is going to be clear about where I'm going.
Okay.
Yeah. I really try not to do the I'm going to New Haven thing. I really try to just say it.
Okay.
Yep. So reach out if you see me, if you find yourself in New Haven or Connecticut or on Yale's campus. Folks, it's been the honor of a lifetime to get to be on this team. And Telos needs your support. I'll make one last plug. This work would not happen without the generosity of our donors. And if you've appreciated our work, if you've been invited into peacemaking from what we've been doing over the past years, consider becoming a donor, a monthly donor even. It really makes our work possible. And as I said earlier, it is a reminder and a commitment to seeing this island grow, to seeing this movement grow, because we need each other. And this is how that happens. So step in, jump into this work, and together let's see what we can do. Folks, thanks for listening. We will see you when the time is right and this show resurrects. Who knows when that might be? But we thank you for listening and have a good night. Have a good solstice, perhaps.